I discovered my husband has been writing detailed fiction about our marriage problems online, twisting everything to make me look like the villain while thousands of people comfort him. I honestly don't know where to begin with this. I'm using a throwaway because my husband knows my main account, and at this point, I don't trust him with anything anymore. I'm still shaking as I type this. 2 days ago, my entire perception of my marriage and the man I've loved for 8 years completely shattered in a single moment. For context, I'm 32 and my husband, Derek, is 35. We've been married for 6 years, together for 8. We always had what I thought was a solid relationship. Sure, we've had our ups and downs like any couple, but I genuinely believed we communicated well and respected each other. Derek works in IT and I'm a physical therapist. We don't have kids yet, though we've been talking about it more seriously in the past year. It all started when I noticed Derek had been spending a lot of time on his laptop in the evenings. Now, this itself wasn't unusual, he's always been a bit of a tech guy, but something felt different. He would snap the laptop shut whenever I walked into the room, and he started password protecting everything. When I asked him about it casually, he claimed he was working on a surprise project for us. I wanted to believe him. Last week, I came home early from work because a patient canceled. Derek was supposed to be at work too, but his car was in the driveway. I walked in quietly, not intentionally sneaking but not announcing myself either, and found him at the kitchen table, intensely focused on his laptop. He didn't notice me at first, and I saw him typing rapidly, completely absorbed in whatever he was doing. When he finally noticed me, he jumped like he'd seen a ghost and quickly closed his laptop. He stammered something about working from home and asked why I was back so early. I explained about the cancellation, but the whole interaction left me feeling uneasy. I'm not proud of what I did next, but that night, when Derek was in the shower, I checked his laptop. He'd left it on the couch, and for once, it wasn't locked. I know this was a violation of his privacy, and under normal circumstances, I would never do this. But his behavior had been so strange, and my gut was screaming that something was wrong. What I discovered was far worse than the affair I had half expected to find. Instead, I found dozens of lengthy posts on a relationship advice forum. All written by my husband. All about our marriage. All complete and utter fabrications. In these posts, Derek portrayed himself as the suffering, patient husband to an emotionally unstable, manipulative, sometimes abusive wife. Me. He wrote detailed stories about arguments we never had, cruel things I never said, manipulative tactics I never employed. He claimed I had isolated him from his friends. False. I've actively encouraged his friendships, that I controlled our finances, we have separate and joint accounts that we both manage, and that I constantly belittled his career. I've always been proud of his work and tell him so regularly. One post described how I supposedly threw a dinner plate at him during an argument about visiting his parents, an incident that never happened. We've never even argued about visiting his parents. I get along well with them and we see them monthly. Another post claimed I had a meltdown when he wanted to spend time with his friends, describing me screaming and threatening to leave him. I have never, ever done anything remotely like this. The community response to these posts was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments offering sympathy, telling him he was being abused, suggesting therapy or even divorce. People calling me, this fictional version of me, toxic, narcissistic, abusive. And Derek responded to these comments, thanking people for their support, giving updates about how he was trying to stand up for himself against me, his cruel, controlling wife. I felt physically ill reading these posts. The person he described wasn't me at all. Not even close. I sat there for what must have been hours, reading post after post, comment after comment, trying to understand why my husband would do this. Why would he paint me as a monster to strangers on the internet? What was he getting from this? When Derek came out of the shower and found me with his laptop, the look on his face was one I'll never forget. Not guilt or shame, just anger that I had discovered his secret. You had no right to look at my private things, he said, as if I was the one who had committed the greater betrayal. I was too shocked to even cry. I just asked him, why? Why would you make up these horrible lies about me? His response chilled me. He said he wasn't lying, just processing his feelings and that the stories were emotionally true even if the details were enhanced. He claimed he needed an outlet where he could talk about our problems without judgment. But these weren't our problems. These were complete fabrications. I told him this, my voice shaking, and he had the audacity to tell me that I just didn't see how my behavior affected him. That I was gaslighting him by denying his experiences. I spent that night at my sister's house. I couldn't bear to look at him. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day trying to process what had happened. Derek called and texted repeatedly, alternating between apologizing and somehow still trying to justify what he'd done. He claimed he would stop posting, that he would get therapy, that he loved me and hadn't meant to hurt me. I returned home the following day, not because I had forgiven him, but because I needed time to figure out what to do. When I got there, Derek had prepared this whole elaborate apology dinner. He cried, saying he had been feeling insecure about our marriage and the attention from strangers online had filled some need for validation. He swore he would delete all the posts and never do it again. I sat there looking at this man I thought I knew, wondering how I could ever trust him again. How could I believe anything he said when he had been constructing this elaborate fictional version of me, of us, for who knows how long? The part that keeps haunting me is thinking about all those people reading his posts, forming this image of me as this horrible, abusive person. Thousands of strangers out there think I'm a monster, and they don't even know my name or what I look like. It feels like such a profound violation. I've been staying with my sister for the past 2 days. Derek keeps trying to contact me, saying he'll do anything to fix this. But I don't know if this is fixable. How can I ever trust that he's not secretly harboring these distorted views of me? How can I trust that he won't continue seeking validation at my expense? And worst of all, how do I know that these fabrications don't reflect how he actually sees me on some level? I'm writing this because I need perspective from people who aren't emotionally invested in my marriage. Am I overreacting? Is this something therapy could help with? Or is this a fundamental breach of trust that can't be repaired? Part of me still loves him and wants to believe this was some bizarre aberration that we can move past. But another part feels like I've woken up next to a stranger, someone capable of constructing elaborate lies about the person who trusted him most. Update, 3 days later. First, I want to thank everyone for the support and advice. I was overwhelmed by the response my post received. To those who shared similar experiences, I'm so sorry you went through this too. I never imagined something like this was common enough for others to relate to. I wanted to provide an update on what's happened since I posted. After a few days at my sister's, I agreed to meet Derek at a coffee shop to talk. I chose a public place because I wanted to stay calm and composed, and I thought being in public would help both of us keep the conversation productive. When I arrived, Derek already had a whole speech prepared. He started by apologizing profusely, saying he knew what he did was wrong and inexcusable. Then he tried to explain himself. According to him, he started writing these posts about 6 months ago during a period when he was feeling depressed and insecure about various aspects of his life, his job performance, our delayed plans for starting a family, some friendships that had drifted apart. He claimed that writing these fictional scenarios where he was the victim gave him attention and sympathy he craved, and that it had nothing to do with how he actually viewed me. He said he knew the difference between his posts and reality, and that he never actually believed the things he wrote. When I pressed him on why he chose to make me the villain specifically, he got uncomfortable. Eventually, he admitted that he had some unresolved feelings about certain aspects of our relationship, minor disagreements that he had never properly communicated to me, things he should have brought up directly but instead let fester. I asked to see the posts, which he initially resisted. But I held firm, saying I needed to know exactly what had been said about me. He reluctantly showed me his account on his phone. I spent almost an hour reading through everything while he sat across from me, visibly anxious. The posts were even more extensive than I'd realized. There were over 30 detailed stories spanning months. Some were completely fabricated events, while others took real, minor disagreements we'd had and twisted them beyond recognition, amplifying my reactions and painting me in the worst possible light. In his fictional world, I was controlling, emotionally volatile, and endlessly demanding. What struck me most was the character development. This fictional version of me grew increasingly abusive over time, as if Derek was building this alternate reality where he was trapped in a progressively worsening situation. The comments were just as disturbing as I remembered, hundreds of people offering support, telling him to leave me, suggesting I had personality disorders based on his fictional accounts. After reading everything, I felt completely drained. I looked at Derek and asked, Do you understand what you've done? You've created a digital legacy of lies about me that can never be fully erased. These stories are out there now. He started crying, saying he would delete everything, that he would post retractions admitting he'd made it all up. I told him that wouldn't undo the damage. Hundreds of people had already consumed these stories and formed their opinions about this person they thought was me. I then asked the question that had been burning in my mind: have you done this before? Written fiction about other people in your life? His hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. He admitted that yes, he had written similar fiction about previous relationships and even some co-workers, though not to this extent. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, it was a pattern of behavior. I realized in that moment that I couldn't continue in this marriage. Not just because of the breach of trust, but because Derek had revealed himself to be someone fundamentally different from the person I thought I'd married. Someone who could methodically construct elaborate lies about the people closest to him for attention and sympathy. Someone who could read hundreds of comments calling his wife abusive based on his own fabrications and feel validated rather than ashamed. I told him I wanted a divorce. He broke down completely, begging for another chance, promising therapy, promising to do anything to make it right. I remained calm but firm. I explained that this wasn't just about the posts, it was about learning that the person I married was capable of this level of deception and seemed to have no concept of the harm it could cause until caught. I've since consulted with a lawyer and started the divorce process. I've also started seeing a therapist to help process all of this. The violation and betrayal run deep, and I know it will take time to heal. Derek moved out last weekend. He's staying with a friend while we sort out the logistics of separating our lives. He continues to send messages apologizing and asking for reconciliation, but I've been clear about my decision. One unexpected outcome of all this is that I've had several conversations with mutual friends who have revealed that Derek had told them minor lies about me over the years, nothing as extreme as his online posts, but small distortions that painted me as more difficult or demanding than I am. It seems this pattern of slightly twisting reality to gain sympathy has been happening all along, just in more subtle ways that I never noticed. I'm taking things one day at a time now. Some days are harder than others. I still find myself wondering if I'm making the right decision, if we could have worked through this with enough therapy and time. But then I remember the calculated nature of what he did, the months of consistent deception, and I know I'm doing what's necessary for my own well-being. To those who suggested I might be the one distorting reality or that perhaps there was truth to his posts, I've really soul-searched about this. I've talked extensively with my therapist, my sister, and close friends who know both of us well. While I'm not perfect and have certainly contributed to problems in our relationship in various ways, the specific incidents Derek described simply did not happen as he portrayed them. Many never happened at all. I appreciate everyone who took the time to offer advice and support. It helped me find the clarity and strength I needed during one of the most confusing and painful times of my life. Update, 2 weeks later. I didn't expect to be updating again so soon, but there's been a significant development. Yesterday, I received an email from a woman named Megan who identified herself as Derek's ex-girlfriend from about 10 years ago, before he and I met. She had somehow found my post, I'm still not clear exactly how, recognized the situation from my description of Derek's behavior, and felt compelled to reach out. According to Megan, Derek did the exact same thing during their relationship. He wrote detailed fictional accounts of their relationship problems on forums, portraying her as emotionally abusive and unstable while presenting himself as the patient, long-suffering boyfriend. She only discovered this when a mutual friend came across the posts and recognized enough details to realize who they were about. Megan sent me links to some of these old posts that are still accessible online. Reading them was eerie, they followed almost the exact same pattern as the posts about me. The same escalating narrative of abuse, the same specific allegations, controlling behavior, isolation from friends, emotional manipulation, even some of the same phrases and expressions I'd seen in his posts about me. It was like he had a template for these fictional accounts that he just recycled with each relationship. What's most disturbing is that when Megan confronted him about these posts years ago, she says Derek went through the exact same cycle of reactions, initial defensiveness, then tearful apologies and promises to change, claims he would get therapy, and ultimately, when she didn't immediately forgive him, attempts to make her feel like she was overreacting to what he described as just venting. Megan said their relationship ended shortly after her discovery, and she had always wondered if Derek had continued this behavior with other partners. She told me she debated for years whether she should try to warn whoever he dated next, but ultimately decided it wasn't her place and hoped he had gotten help. When I asked her why she decided to contact me now, she said my post described the situation so precisely that she felt I deserved to know this wasn't an isolated incident but a long-standing pattern. She apologized for not finding a way to warn me years ago. I was shocked, but also oddly relieved in a way. This confirmation that Derek's behavior wasn't new and wasn't triggered by anything I did has removed any lingering self-doubt I had about my decision to end our marriage. It wasn't about me at all, it was a compulsive behavior pattern he's had for at least a decade. I forwarded Megan's email to Derek with a brief message saying this confirmed my decision was final and asking him not to contact me again except through our lawyers. I expected angry denials or elaborate explanations, but his response was just 4 words: "I'm getting real help." I haven't responded. I met with my therapist yesterday to process this new information. She pointed out that this behavior pattern suggests Derek may have some deeper psychological issues that go beyond just seeking attention or validation. She mentioned possibilities like pathological lying or certain personality disorders that involve creating false narratives for sympathy. Whatever the cause, it's clearly deeply ingrained and not something that would be easily fixed even with therapy. While part of me feels compassion for whatever underlying issues Derek must be struggling with, I also feel completely at peace with my decision to move forward with the divorce. Learning that this behavior predates our relationship by many years has removed any sense of responsibility I might have felt for fixing the situation or giving the marriage another chance. The divorce process is moving forward. We don't have children and our financial entanglements are relatively straightforward, so hopefully, it will be finalized within a few months. I'm staying in our house temporarily while Derek continues to live with his friend. We're communicating only through emails about practical matters, which helps maintain necessary boundaries. Some mutual friends have taken sides, as often happens in divorces. A few have expressed that they think I'm overreacting and should give Derek another chance if he's really getting help. But most have been supportive once I explained the situation, especially after learning about this pattern with his ex. Several friends have admitted that Derek had occasionally made comments to them that painted me in an unfairly negative light, which they previously dismissed as normal relationship complaints but now see as part of this larger pattern. I've started to rebuild my life as a single person. I joined a book club and a hiking group to expand my social circle beyond the friends we shared. I've reconnected with old friends I'd somewhat lost touch with during my marriage. My sister has been an incredible support through all of this. The hardest part has been letting go of the future I thought we would have. We were talking about starting a family soon, buying a bigger house, all those plans you make when you think you're with your life partner. I'm 32 and suddenly having to reimagine what my life might look like. But I remind myself daily that as painful as this is now, discovering Derek's true nature before having children with him was a blessing in disguise. To those who asked if I was going to try to have the posts removed, Derek claims he has deleted all of his posts about me. I have no way to verify this, and I've decided not to obsess over trying to scrub every trace of his fiction from the internet. I know who I am, and the people who matter in my life know who I am too. I can't control what strangers on the internet might think about a nameless, faceless woman in some relationship posts they read months or years ago. Thank you again to everyone who offered support and advice. And if anyone reading this recognizes similar behavior in their own relationship, please take it as the serious red flag it is. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, and remember that you deserve a relationship built on honesty and mutual respect. Update: 3 months later. It's been a while since my last update, and a lot has happened. I wanted to come back and share where things stand now, partly for closure and partly because the support I received here was so significant in helping me through the darkest moments of this experience. The divorce was finalized last week. The process was relatively smooth as divorces go. We didn't have children, and we reached a fair agreement on dividing our assets without excessive legal battles. I kept the house, buying out his portion, and we divided our savings and investments equitably. There were tense moments, especially when discussing the emotional impact of his actions, but overall, we managed to keep things civil. About a month after my last update, Derek reached out through email to tell me he had started intensive therapy. According to him, He was diagnosed with a combination of issues including pathological lying tendencies and narcissistic traits that his therapist believed stemmed from childhood emotional neglect. He didn't share this seeking reconciliation but said he thought I deserved to know he was taking steps to address his behavior. I thanked him for the information but maintained my boundaries. I made it clear that while I wished him well in his healing journey, it didn't change my decision about our marriage. He seemed to accept this and has respected my boundaries since then, only contacting me when necessary for divorce proceedings. In a surprising turn of events, Megan, Derek's ex who had contacted me, and I have developed a friendship. We met for coffee shortly after she reached out, and there was an immediate bond between us, not just because of our shared experience with Derek, but because we genuinely connected as people. She's become an unexpected source of support and understanding through this process. There's something uniquely validating about talking to someone who has lived through almost the exact same experience. Through conversations with Megan and my own therapy, I've gained better insight into the dynamics of my marriage. I can now recognize patterns of subtle manipulation that I hadn't fully acknowledged before, ways Derek would slightly twist situations to make himself the victim or me the unreasonable one. Nothing dramatic enough to raise major alarms, but consistent enough to gradually shape how I perceived our relationship and myself. I've spent a lot of time working through feelings of shame and embarrassment about not seeing these red flags earlier. My therapist has helped me understand that people like Derek are often exceptionally skilled at maintaining a convincing facade, especially with those closest to them. The relationship had many genuinely good aspects, which made it harder to see the troubling undercurrents. On a more positive note, I've made significant progress in rebuilding my life. I've redecorated the house to make it fully mine, removing reminders of our shared life and creating a space that reflects just me. It's been surprisingly therapeutic to make these physical changes to my environment. My career as a physical therapist has become a greater focus. I've taken on additional training in a specialized area I've always been interested in, and I'm considering opening my own practice in the next year or two. Pouring energy into professional growth has been healing in its own way. Socially, I've maintained the new connections I mentioned in my last update and have become closer with several people from both my hiking group and book club. I've also reconnected with old friends from college who have been wonderfully supportive. My sister continues to be my rock through all of this. Dating is still not on my radar. I'm focusing on rebuilding my relationship with myself first, learning to fully trust my perceptions and instincts again. My therapist says this is healthy and that there's no timeline I need to follow for moving on romantically. The most significant change has been internal. While I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, I've developed a much stronger sense of self-trust and clearer boundaries. I've learned that kindness doesn't have to mean making yourself vulnerable to deception, and that skepticism isn't the same as cynicism. I'm more attuned to the difference between authentic communication and manipulation disguised as openness. I still occasionally wonder if Derek is continuing his pattern with new people in his life. Part of me hopes that he's genuinely changing through therapy, not just for his sake but for anyone he forms relationships with in the future. But I've accepted that his journey is no longer my responsibility or concern. To those who might be reading this and seeing parallels in your own relationship, trust yourself. If something feels wrong, pay attention to that feeling. Document reality as you experience it. Seek perspectives from trusted friends or family who know you well. And remember that someone who truly loves you wouldn't deliberately distort your shared reality or paint you as a villain for attention or sympathy. I'm not fully healed yet, and I know there will still be difficult days ahead. But I'm moving forward with a clearer understanding of what happened and what I need in my relationships going forward: honesty, respect, and a shared commitment to seeing each other accurately, even when it's uncomfortable. Thank you again to everyone who offered support, advice, and validation when I needed it most. While this chapter of my life is closing, I'm cautiously optimistic about what the next one will bring. Final update: 1 year later. It's been exactly 1 year since I discovered Derek's online posts and my life took an unexpected turn. I wanted to share this final update both for my own sense of closure and for anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. The past year has been a journey of healing, rediscovery, and growth that I couldn't have imagined when I was in the depths of shock and betrayal. While I wouldn't choose to go through this experience again, I can now see how it catalyzed positive changes in my life that might never have happened otherwise. Professionally, I took the leap and opened my own physical therapy practice specializing in trauma recovery and chronic pain management. The timing feels symbolic, using my own experience of recovery to create a space where others can heal. The practice is small but growing steadily, and the work feels more meaningful than ever. My relationship with myself has transformed completely. I've developed a level of self-trust and inner confidence that I never had before, even prior to my marriage. Working with my therapist, whom I still see monthly, helped me understand how subtle invalidation over years had eroded my trust in my own perceptions. Rebuilding that trust has been the most powerful aspect of my recovery. I've maintained my friendship with Megan, Derek's ex. What started as a connection based on shared trauma has evolved into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared interests. We rarely talk about Derek anymore unless something specific comes up that we need to process. As for Derek himself, I've had minimal contact. About 6 months ago, he sent me a lengthy email that appeared to be part of his therapy process, acknowledging in specific detail the harm he had caused, taking full responsibility without excuses, and explaining, but not justifying, the psychological issues he was working through in treatment. He made it clear he wasn't seeking reconciliation or even forgiveness, just wanting to offer a complete apology as part of his recovery process. I appreciated the apology but didn't feel a need to respond beyond a brief acknowledgement. I wish him well in his healing journey, but that chapter of my life is firmly closed. Dating has been an interesting frontier to navigate. I started cautiously about 6 months ago, first just casual coffee meetings arranged through friends or dating apps. I was transparent with potential partners about my experience, using it as a sort of screening tool. Anyone who dismissed my concerns or suggested I was overreacting was clearly not right for me. 3 months ago, I met someone who responded to my story with genuine understanding and appropriate concern. Michael is thoughtful and transparent in a way that feels natural rather than performative. We're taking things slowly, but for the first time since my marriage ended, I can envision building trust with someone new. The relationship is still new, but it's helped me realize that my experience with Derek hasn't permanently damaged my capacity for trust, it's just made me more discerning about who earns it. One unexpected development has been hearing from 2 other women who had relationships with Derek before me. After my divorce was finalized, I wrote a carefully worded, factual post on my personal social media accounts explaining why my marriage had ended. I didn't name Derek or include identifying details, but I described the pattern of fictionalizing our relationship online. I did this primarily to address the inevitable questions and speculation from wider circles of friends and acquaintances, but it had an unintended consequence. 2 women from Derek's past reached out, sharing that they had experienced similar behavior from him during their relationships, though neither had discovered the online posts like Megan and I had. One woman described how Derek would tell mutual friends dramatically different versions of their arguments, always casting himself as the patient, reasonable partner dealing with an emotional, irrational girlfriend. The other described how he would subtly twist her words during disagreements, then later refer back to these distorted versions as if they were exactly what she had said. These connections helped confirm that what I experienced was part of a long-standing pattern, not something I had somehow provoked or imagined. It was validation I hadn't even realized I still needed. I've done a lot of reflection on how I could have missed the red flags in our relationship. With hindsight and therapy, I can now identify subtle warning signs that were present from early on: Derek's tendency to position himself as the victim in conflicts with friends or coworkers, the small discrepancies I occasionally noticed between how he described events and how I remembered them, his unusual need for validation and sympathy from others. None of these alone seemed significant, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't see when I was in the middle of it. The house that once felt haunted by painful memories now feels fully mine. I've remodeled several rooms, planted a garden, and filled the space with art and books that bring me joy. It's become a sanctuary rather than a reminder of betrayal. My circle of friends has evolved and strengthened. Some mutual friends drifted away after the divorce, uncomfortable with the complexity of the situation or unwilling to choose sides. But my core support system has remained steadfast, and I've formed deeper connections with people who showed up for me during this challenging time. The most profound change has been in how I view trust and reality in relationships. I've learned that healthy love includes a commitment to shared truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I now value radical honesty and consistency above surface charm or dramatic expressions of affection. My boundaries are clearer, my expectations more grounded in reality. For anyone reading this who might be questioning their own perceptions in a relationship that feels somehow off, trust yourself. Document things that seem wrong. Seek outside perspectives from people who care about your well-being, and remember that someone who truly loves you will want to understand your reality, not replace it with a fictional version that serves their needs at your expense. This will be my final update on this chapter of my life. While the experience will always be part of my story, it no longer defines my present or my future. I'm moving forward with wisdom I didn't ask for but have nonetheless integrated into who I am becoming. Thank you to everyone who offered support, insight, and encouragement throughout this journey. Your perspectives helped me find clarity when I needed it most, and for that, I'll always be grateful.